private credit is basically it's almost like hard money lending
Right.
in the business
Hmm.
world, right? As we're all familiar with on the real estate side. So we're able to underwrite capital on a very quick basis. The majority of it is collateralized by that business, and then the business owner gets to deploy that really quickly to capture his revenue, and investors make a very healthy return on that.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I am your host, as always, Yona Weiss, and I am grateful to be joined today by another amazing guest. We have Dave Wolcott on the show. Welcome, my friend. How are you doing?
Yona, really grateful to connect with you and your audience.
I'm glad you could make it. It's been quite a while. We met back years ago. I was a guest on your podcast. I mean, this is probably going back 5, 6, 7 years. I don't even remember. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while for sure.
Are
Yeah,
you still hosting your
I
podcast?
am. Yeah. Wealth strategy, secrets of the ultra wealthy. So we're still firing away, and I've been enjoying it. And I always learn something every time we have a show. It's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, you've had some really incredible guests on that show as well. So glad you're still plugging away at that. And for our listeners who may not be so familiar with you, I'd love for you to kind of give a brief background on who you are, what you've done, what you've accomplished, and maybe where you're going at this point.
Yeah, you bet. So, probably like a lot of listeners, I was raised in a middle class family in Connecticut. We didn't really talk about money. It was really kind of taboo to talk about money. We probably lived in more of a scarcity type mindset. We really were very fortunate, but that was really the generation that I grew up under. And then I was told that the recipe for success was go to school, get good grades. You would get a job and life would just work out. So I really followed that path of conventional wisdom, and then had the opportunity after college to serve my country and join the Marine Corps. So I did that as an officer in the Marines and learned some amazing things. I traveled the world. I went to Israel, in fact, which was a phenomenal experience. Also, was combat tested and shot at. So you learn so much about yourself and other people, things such as leadership, teamwork, and integrity. And then after the Marines, I transitioned into the corporate world and got into the tech industry. And shortly after that, my wife and I started raising a family, and we had an 18-month-old toddler. And then on October 24th, 2000, we literally had triplets, Tiona. So we quadrupled the size. I knew you have a big family, but we quadrupled the size of our family like overnight.
That was called scaling
And I
fast, right?
Exactly. And I mean, I just can't tell you, to this day, holding three babies in my arms at the same time was the most profound experience I had ever had. And when I looked at them, that paternal instinct in me just said, I have got to provide for, security and a life for this amazing family that we created. So I went to see my financial advisor, and he said, you know what? Just max out your 401k. They have things called 529 plans for the kids. And it was right then that I just knew I wasn't going to build real wealth as a retail investor in the stock market. So this launched me on this obsessive journey to start studying centimillionaires and billionaires and really figuring out what is the playbook for building, real legacy wealth. So I started investing in everything from retail real estate, raw land, office buildings, oil and gas investments, single family, multifamily. And this is even before syndications were really out, remember. So getting into that private world was quite challenging. Fast forward 20 years, I built an amazing portfolio. and really an overall methodology, which is in my book called The Holistic Wealth Strategy, which is essentially a blueprint to help other people really figure out how can we, create passive income? How can we stop trading our time for money? How can we reduce our taxes and just live an extraordinary life?
I mean, that's an incredible story, from the service, and thank you for that. I'm sure so much has been gained from those experiences. I can't even imagine what that's like. And then bringing triplets into the world, which, if I'm doing the math correctly, they're pretty much on their way. Hopefully, they've learned a thing or two from
Yes,
you
they're
as
in their
well.
20s now. They're in their 20s now, and it's a fantastic experience. Probably one of the best things I've ever done is, build a family, and it's a journey that keeps going.
That's awesome. What was the most impactful investment that you found over the years? And I know it's a hard question because you've done so many different investment types, and I'm sure you've seen several cycles through the years as well. And but I think it's we learn something from every experience. So it's kind of thrown out there, and I'm sure there's more than one. But if you just pick one story
Yeah,
or
well, I'm going
one
to give you
investment,
something that's a little bit contrarian and for people to really chew on, which is the greatest investment I've ever made is investing in myself.
yeah.
It's actually not that next real estate deal or oil and gas deal. You can always make more money, but if you don't have the right mindset, I know people with nine figures of wealth, eight figures of wealth that are not living a great life. They might have a toxic relationship. They may still be living in a scarcity mindset from, things that they kind of grew up with. They're trading their time for money, working
Mhm.
70 hours a week, right? And things like that. So the greatest asset that I always tell people is yourself, right? So how can you invest in, and there's actually six forms of capital here, Yona.
Hmm.
So we all think of financial capital and we understand that, right? Trying to build our balance sheet, trying to build income. But in addition to that, there's other dimensions of capital. So we have intellectual capital, we have spiritual capital, we have human capital, we have emotional capital, right? And social capital. And all of these different forms of capital, make up what I like to call holistic wealth, right? Because again, you could have all the financial, think about Steve Jobs. He had all the financial capital he could ever spend in a lifetime, but yet he couldn't buy himself another day of life at, the age of 55, right? What a tragedy. So I think the more you can learn about, increasing your other forms of capital, intellectual capital, social capital, and emotional capital, all those things, it's very fascinating how money can actually flow to you versus constantly chasing it.
That's incredible. And I love how you call it the holistic approach. And obviously your book is, the holistic wealth approach. It's something that I think people don't take into account, right? We think about our financial capital mostly. And yes, people talk, maybe think about some of the other things, but not in the way that you've described, in the way that I guess your approach is taking it into account and really, and like you said, investing in yourself and investing in things. So I love the fact that you kind of turn that on its head, showing that the biggest investment is really in yourself. Because yes, there are, I'm sure you've done, hundreds of investments over the years, and investing in yourself really is the one thing that allowed you to do the rest. And so it's really the foundation of everything else. So love that. Love that approach. Now speaking of investments, and I don't want to get too deep into each one of these things, but I know you do multifamily. I know you do storage. I know you have, on your website, you talk about infinite banking and these types of things as well. But one thing that kind of jumped out at me that I'm not personally too familiar with, which you have investments in, is private credit. So I'd love to take just, and we've never talked about it. Like I said, I'm not familiar with it much myself at all. So I'd love if you could take a couple of minutes just to kind of describe what that investment looks like and what that actually is.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just back up a second to give
Sure.
context, right? And so that We've learned again from family offices and centimillionaires and billionaires how they really invest is getting really good at 1 to 3 asset classes. This gives you the best level of due diligence. You just keep getting sharper and sharper at what you're doing. It gives you the best access to deal flow to really understand, who's in there. So we've narrowed our investment thesis down to 3 core sectors: real estate, energy, and private credit and debt. And why we like these sectors is because they're all non correlated to the stock market. They have strong macroeconomic fundamentals. So we're investing for 10, 20-year horizons, not nothing really short term. And then they all have these attributes in terms of a return profile, unlike stocks that are really linear in nature, is they have a trifecta. So they have tax efficiency, they have passive income, and they have forced appreciation to be able to make upside on that. Now, private credit specifically has been a favorite over the last decade for billionaires, and I can tell you why. Because banks are increasingly tightening their regulations and not able to give funding to a lot of small businesses that are growing. So think of maybe a roofing company or an HVAC company, right? Where maybe the business owner didn't get a college degree and he goes to a bank and it could take 6 months to actually get funding, or a roofer for that matter. I can tell you, I live in Florida. We had a hurricane. And these roofers, they've got 3 years of backlogged work, right? They can't, right, fill all the orders, right? But they need capital to go buy equipment, right? They need labor to be able to fulfill that work they have. So what private credit is basically, it's almost like hard money lending
Right.
in the business
Mm.
world, right? As we're all familiar with on the real estate side. So we're able to underwrite capital on a very quick basis. The majority of it is collateralized by that business, and then the business owner gets to deploy that really quickly to capture his revenue, and investors make a very healthy return on that. So and understand that private credit has many shapes and sizes to it. You can
Sure.
actually invest in private credit in defense contractors, in real estate specifically, but ours, the one we're focusing on, is actually businesses, right? Businesses that have a strong track record, they're growing, they need additional capital, and they're looking outside of traditional funding facilities through banks.
That's
But the way these work is you provide that access to capital to the business, and then, usually within 7 months, it's literally paid off. And the great thing as an investor is, to reduce risk on this, is not only is this like we're diversified across 15 different industries. We never take more than a 5% position in any
mm.
given loan. So if one loan goes bad, right, we don't have all that much exposure there. And then also, we're actually collecting principal and interest payments on a daily and weekly basis. So as that capital comes back into the fund, it
Hmm.
then gets redeployed into another deal. So it's like diversified multiple, multiple times,
Wow.
and just creates this velocity of cash flow that's giving us very strong double-digit returns on a consistent basis.
That's fascinating. So, I mean, I'm familiar with some of the business loan, like factoring and these types of things where you need kind of
Yeah.
fast capital. But it's fascinating. I didn't realize there was such a a strong need. I guess there is, right? Most businesses do need money to keep their businesses healthy and running and flowing. And as you said, the financial institutions are much more rigid and much more difficult to attain
Yeah,
that
and
capital.
let me break down something else that's really fascinating, right? So, in this world of private credit, right, or private equity in particular, we're able to work directly with a sponsor that's an institutional quality sponsor. I can tell you that some very, very large institutions you would know the names of are investing with the same sponsor. Now, what we are able to do is actually pool investor capital together through a fund model. And then therefore, we can bring that, we can bring 10 million to the table to that sponsor so that we can actually get the same terms as that institution does. So as an individual investor, if you see some of these deals like, hey, that you can get out in the market, they're probably, maybe they're paying 9 to 12%. Well, ours is over 20%. Right. And it's, you can get much higher returns because we've cut out, there's no middlemen in this deal, right? We're working directly with the sponsor and getting those terms. So it's just an interesting point if you're looking for opportunities to really understand how private equity is really structured in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's really a whole different level. Like you said, there are a lot of people investing, retail investors are investing in individual deals. And yeah, sure, there's a lot of different funds out there that bring on multiple investors and try to create a model where they are investing as a group and getting more favorable terms. But when you're coming with a much larger check and a much larger group, you're able to access even more I guess, investment opportunities that you would otherwise not be able to. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating. But yeah, I mean, the double digits. It seems like it's, for a lot of people listening, it's like, it sounds like almost too good to be true, right? It's like, yes, I've heard, 10%, 15% returns, and then anything over 20%, it's like, it seems a little too good to be true. Like how is that even possible? But you have a track record, right? It's not like, you've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah,
It's
the other interesting thing too, Yona, is like a lot of real estate projects, right? You have to wait 5 years
Yep.
for it to go full cycle. What's really interesting in this, like I mentioned, the average length of a loan is only 7 months. So we have real-time performance literally every month, right? So, we're doing almost 2% a month, right? Probably on average, right? And then that's really scaling. So you're seeing it in real time, the performance.
Yeah. I mean, that really shaves off a big barrier to entry. Obviously, I assume, you take on accredited investors, and there is some limitation for certain people to get into these types of investments, right?
Well, you must be an accredited investor to access these types of
Right.
opportunities for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's unfortunate. I mean, because I think obviously you're dealing with a different grade of investor, but to be able to access these types of things, it seems like it is really limited to accredited investors or people who are able to attain a higher level investment. Like, is there anything out there for, you know, smaller fish out there? People kind of want to get
Yeah,
started
I
in
think
investing.
there's a lot of platforms, I mean, there's a lot of platforms nowadays that you can just go online and, minimum investment of $1,000 or something, and you can get access to start, accessing either private credit, private debt, different models. But you'll notice that the returns are a lot lower. Right? But your minimums are a lot lower. So that could be a good place to, kind of get your feet wet and everything. But, for people that are looking for either really strong cash flow or upside potential, like, we have a lot of investors, which a great opportunity is, let's say they've got, a legacy 401ks or IRAs. Well, I mean, at any given 20-year period, you're likely making 7%, right, in the market before taxes, fees, and inflation. So if you transition some of that capital into a self-directed IRA and then put it into some allocation into this fund, you can literally 3x your performance, right? So we're trying to help investors come up with creative ways to reduce risk and increase yield, right? And not just through one particular investment, but through an entire strategy. How do we lower your overall taxes? Right? So whatever your tax rate is, can we reduce that by 10, by 20%, right? Cost segregation is obviously a huge strategy to that. But there's other strategies like oil and gas. That's why we like energy. We have an energy fund. Now it's end of the year. So if you have any active income, we have a fund. We're working with an institutional quality partner that it's up to 92% tax offset in this year 2025 of active income, right? Which is huge, not to mention a very good return and profile there. So I think when you start to put some of these pieces in place of reducing taxes, reducing risk, creating more diversification and focus, getting off of the stock market roller coaster, creating multiple streams of income, you actually start to create this flywheel effect of your cash flow, right, of your balance sheet to really grow that portfolio. And then ultimately, Yona, like I said, this is all about living that, holistic
Right.
life, right? And
Yeah.
wealth and to, be able to go on the vacation with your family, or not be working those extra hours because you start to take control over it. You have other assets coming in and, you're able to just really live a great life and just get out of that role of, scarcity.
Yeah, I love that you keep bringing back, the holistic wealth strategy, obviously the name of your book, and really it's your whole approach. And it's clear from your messaging also that you've really integrated this into your whole investment thesis. And it's really about you've lived it. And so I think for a lot of readers or a lot of listeners out there, it's not just some, some foreign thing. It reminds me of like, and just to be transparent, I haven't read the book yet, so I'm speaking not from direct experience, but just from hearing from you and having read about the book, et cetera, and about the approach that you've shared here. It's the stories that you've actually lived through, right? And it reminds me, back in the day, first one of the first investment books or books in business that I read, Rich Dad Poor Dad. A lot of people, it's one of their first books they read, right? The little purple book. It's like you're hearing from his experience in life and walking through how he had to kind of learn the hard way. And it reminds me of that in terms of what you've gone through and how you've built this system to help others.
Yeah, and this is what drives me, Yona, because if I can help someone shortcut time, and it took me 20 years to really figure this out and put all of this together. But if someone can literally, we're watching some of our clients like literally do this in like a year or 2 years, like regain complete control of their financial future, which creates clarity and confidence in their lives, and it's truly life changing, right? If you can get on the right track. And sadly, I think the systemic issue is lack of financial education. And of course, Kiyosaki's work was really instrumental for a lot of us to just change the way we think. But what it lacked was, what is the plan, right? Okay, now I get it, but how can I do this, right? I can invest in real estate, but that's another job too, right? How do I make this work? And the ultra wealthy have systems in place that are frankly quite opaque on purpose, right? So can we put this together and really create a machine around, wealth building that becomes automatic, becomes a process, it becomes part of your life, so you could just get there a lot faster.
Yeah, and it's difficult because most people have this mindset where they're kind of blocked. Like, especially if you've been fed as you were and I have been originally through the idea that you put your money in a 401k and you invest. And we're so busy working, a lot of people, that we don't really have time to even take, reflect and figure out how can I actually build wealth? Is it even possible? And to me, it sounds like this is an approach that can be taken for anyone in any stage of life they're in. And really, frankly, even if you are working full time or working overtime and don't have time for this, it's something you can actually incorporate. Am I right with that?
100%. Yeah, it's all about really dispelling, Wall Street's projection around accumulation theory and what they think is right. But how many people do you know have actually built like real wealth in Wall Street?
Yeah, very few. Very few.
Very few, unless someone got lucky because they were trading or something,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But the systematic approach of kind of saving for retirement, and you have to start asking questions like why? What I mean, look, you're a tax specialist. Why does it make sense to defer your taxes in a 401k vehicle? Because I could tell you that the only thing I'm certain about in the future is that taxes will likely be going up. So you're just kicking the can down the road. And I would much rather pay taxes on the seed rather than
Mm.
the harvest. right? So get your capital out today and get it into a tax efficient vehicle like real estate and do a
Right?
cost segregation on it, or put it into energy. Look at the boom in AI that's happening right now. How about being on the right side of that, which is look at the energy demand that's placing on the world, right, to be able to serve that. That's going to be there for easily the next, 10, 20 years.
Right?
So I want to be on the right side of that, right? And getting outside of this accumulation model, which is you work for your whole life for 35 years, 40 years in a career, busting your butt, trading your time for money, and then you start to travel or, spend time with your family and things like that. I think it's totally backwards, right? The real asset is time.
Mm-hmm.
Time is the asset. So, how can we create more time in our lives? And we can do that with passive income by freeing up more capital by paying less in taxes, by doing things like using infinite banking so we create sovereignty around our wealth and also velocity, right? And what we're doing and not get stuck in the banking system or Wall Street.
Yeah. I love how you break it down. It's so clear. It seems it seems so approachable also. It's like, yes, we've been fed all of these narratives about money and wealth, and people don't even take the time to stop and think about it. But when you put it in that perspective, that really time is the real asset. And it's so true because I think of the, 470 plus people I've interviewed on this show, at the last question I ask, and I'll ask you shortly, is, what does success mean to you? I'd say 80 to 90% of them talk about time and talk about the freedom that they have, and being able to, that real success is just having the time to do what you want or where you want. So I'm not going to preemptively get your answer on that because I'd love to hear, organically what you have to say. But with that in mind, actually, let's just transition now to the final four. Why don't we? Because time has flown by, Dave. I don't even know where it's gone so fast. But the first question to you is going to be, what's the worst job that you ever had?
The worst job I ever had was working. I was probably 15 and working at a construction company because they were close by. I could ride my bike there and it paid well. But it was very interesting that a lot of people were just like very toxic towards me, and I don't know if there was this jealousy because I was going to go off to college and things like that, but just the way I was treated, it was a very toxic environment. So, yeah, I guess that was probably my worst one.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me also that most people give an answer to that question in being one of the first jobs that they ever had, as a youngster, which to me, again, it's fascinating because we learn pretty quickly, I think, from those experiences, what to do, what not to do, how we should do. And successful people like yourself, have gone through those experiences and know, okay, let's change it up. Let's not surround ourselves in a toxic environment like your example there. You learn from that quickly. I'm sure you probably, didn't choose to work in an environment like that in the future. And if you did, you knew how to get out quicker than you did the first time.
Sure.
Second question is, what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
Yeah, I would have to say, in this context, right, cash flow quadrant for me, right? I took the purple pill like a lot of folks did, but that construct really helped shape my thinking. In fact, I read it when it just came out in the late 90s. And to know that to play this game, I needed to be a business owner and an investor on the right hand side of the quadrant. And I learned quickly that, trading, I mean, I didn't know any of this when I came out of the Marine Corps, right? I mean, none of this stuff is taught anywhere. So it was like a phenomenal construct to realize that if I become an entrepreneur, then I actually can focus on value creation and I have no cap on the capital that I can create, right? So that was a big awakening. And then, of course, to be an investor too, you'll pay the least amount in taxes as an investor, and you can build up a portfolio, right, to start to create freedom in your life, freedom of purpose, freedom of time, freedom of relationships.
Yeah, very powerful book. So I'm glad you brought that up. It hasn't been brought up in quite a while, but definitely been mentioned before on the show, but Cash Flow Quadrant. We'll put it in the show notes for anyone who hasn't yet read that. Another Kiyosaki classic. We'll go on to the next question, which is, what is a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
Well, I'm developing my Italian language skills. So we've been fortunate enough to actually we have a property in Italy, and my wife has Italian roots. And we've been able to bring our kids over there for the past 13 years, which has
Wow.
been just such an enriching experience to learn another culture. I have friends. I ride on a cycling team over there, and we'll go on 5, 6 hour bike rides, and I've had to learn the language. So I'm probably about 70% fluent right now, but I'm constantly working on my language skills, and it's just a great way to keep your brain sharp,
Mhm.
is working on a different language too.
Absolutely. Totally agree with
Yeah.
that. And also fascinating. That's one of the most common answers that successful people give as well, is learning a language, which tells you something, listeners. If you haven't yet picked up a new language, maybe it's about time to think about doing that. And nowadays with apps and all these kind of, programs out there, it's much easier, but like you said, just immersing yourself and going there, spending, hours on end with people who only speak another language is a quick, fast route to being able to learn that language. I totally agree. Fourth and final question: what does success mean to you?
Success to me, it means living holistic wealth today, not necessarily in the future and saying you're going to be a billionaire or whatever your target is. It's all about today, which really there's two dimensions to that. So you can be one, it's really living at ease in all dimensions of your life, all those forms of capital. Do you have the right amount of health, right? That's giving you the energy to everything that you have. Do you have relationships that are elevating you, or are they taking you backwards, right? All of these things. Do you practice faith and spirituality, right, that are elevating you and really moving you closer to self-actualization and a higher level of consciousness? So being at ease, I believe that's true as part of holistic wealth. And then also focusing on really your unique ability and your authentic self, and how you can create impact in the world, and trying to just leverage your god-given strengths and talents to help others in whatever form that might be. So that's how I really define it. Yeah.
Love that. Very well thought out. Clearly, you've had the time to think that through, and it really shows. A little slightly different perspective than we get often, but much deeper in fact. So I appreciate your perspective. And Dave, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they want?
Sure. I wanted to do this for your listeners, Yona, is offer them a free copy of the book. You can just go to holisticwealthstrategy.com and download a free copy of the book. And from there, you can kind of connect with us on Pick Your Channel.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. We'll include your website and socials as well if you want to learn more about what you do. Really been a pleasure, Dave. It's been too long since we've caught up, and it's really fascinating to me what you've been able to accomplish, and I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks so much, Yona. Really grateful for you.
Awesome. And to our listeners, thank you all for joining and listening all the way to the end once again. And remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.